So, Drew, we've been hearing a lot about NFTs. There's like this, a lot of hype around them. I'm not that familiar with them, but some people might. Is anyone really familiar with NFTs, or are you guys coming more to learn? Yeah, Chief, a little bit. Okay, cool. So, Drew, can you let us know, like, just talk to us about NFTs? Like, what are they? Kind of like, what are they used for? Tell us about what's going on in that world right now.
Yeah. So it'll be hard, honestly, to talk about the breadth of NFTs. They go in so many directions, and it's like, it's really hard, especially at first, to wrap your head around everything. But I'll do my best to do a general, and then I think it'll make a lot more sense when I show this thing that I'm building and talk about NFTs in that context. It's like kind of like one use of NFTs. But basically, NFT, it's in the crypto world. So like Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's a digital thing that has scarcity. So it's this new technology. And that's what Bitcoin is, and why Bitcoin's worth money. It's because it's digital, but you can prove that it's the one, and you can prove these transactions and has this technology, right? So with Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're fungible, and NFTs are non-fungible. So NFT stands for non-fungible token, which just means that you can't swap them out one for one. Everyone is unique. So Bitcoin and the US dollar, for that matter, if I give you $1, you give me back $1, it doesn't matter. They're interchangeable. NFTs are not interchangeable. Each one is unique. Each one has traits. Each one is one. There's one copy, basically.
Like one in all the world.
Yep. And you store that copy on a blockchain that is usually owned by no one, completely decentralized. So it's this way where you can basically put something into the world digitally and say, I can prove that I own this. And from there, it sounds kind of vague just saying that, but from there, it builds out to all these applications. And so a big one that was like really hyped up for a while, but I think is dying down now, is art. And so taking classically, like you would buy a Picasso for $1 million, now you buy an NFT of a modern artist for $1 million. And people can't wrap their heads around it, because it's like, isn't that just a JPEG? And what's crazy is it literally is. Like, it literally is a JPEG, but there's an entry on a blockchain that says you own that JPEG. And because of that, it has value. And so like the headline thing that happened is the Beeple NFT went for $70 million at Christie's auction. So that's like NFTs coming into the mainstream, and like 70 million is mind blowing and literally it was a PNG,
Well, and it's not even the PNG, right? It's the pointer that says you own the PNG.
Yeah.
And so it's like a whole other layer added on top. I think that's where a lot of the, just kind of like, I'm not sure about this kind of attitude comes from, is that because it's not the actual thing, like with the art, with the Picasso, that's in a museum somewhere. You don't necessarily physically have it, right? You bought it, but you're not keeping that, like you're not hanging it on the wall in your hallway, if you bought a Picasso, right? So it's sitting somewhere else. So you don't actually have it, but you've got this piece of paper saying you own it. So there is some similarity there, right? At least I would assume billionaires don't keep them just hanging in their hallways, but maybe they do. I don't know.
Well, the new thing would be, which is, it's very kind of out there if you're new to this world, but they have virtual museums now where people are hanging their virtual artwork. And what's crazy about the virtual artwork, the digital artwork, is it's not just a painting, it's potentially interactive, it could react to the weather if you wanted, but it could has sound, it has movement. So it's a new medium that's like really being shoehorned into traditional art, but it's actually got a lot more possibilities. So and it's weird. It truly is like, it takes a long time to kind of wrap your head around it.
Yeah. There's something that I read this morning that was talking about, like, I think the allure of NFTs is that it makes like the art world accessible, because yeah, sure, you can be ultra rich and buy something for like what, $59 million or $60 million, whatever that was. But you can also like buy things that you treasure or things that are nostalgic and have like a piece of that yourself without having to like, spend $60 million or like what you might have to pay for, owning a piece of art. So I find that interesting. I think part of the allure is probably like the nostalgia of being able to have kind of like a trading card in a way, except you said they're non-fungible. There's only one. So I guess never mind. You can't really, can you trade them after you buy an NFT? Can you sell it?
They're very
Keep
similar to
saying
trading
yes.
cards. Yeah, that's a great analogy. And it's like with the NFT, it's just like a trading card. You get a pack and you have all these different ones, but you might have that like Michael Jordan rookie card that's worth so much money. With NFTs, everyone can have a set of like crypto punks or crypto kitties, but certain ones with the rare traits are worth a lot of money. And like crypto punks, they're worth like $11 million for one. It's wild.
Gotcha. Wait, what's a crypto punk?
Crypto punk is like, that's like what I'm about to show is like in the vein of crypto punks. And the other popular one right now, so crypto punks is like old, and I think they were 2016 or 2017. The popular one right now is called Bored Ape Yacht Club, and they're versions of NFTs that are generated by a computer. So people are creating these layers as art, and then the computer is mixing random layers, and then you have like a new generated art. And so crypto punks, they all look the same. It's like in the same style, and it's a person's face pixel art, but there's 10,000 of them all generated by a computer by combining traits. And it creates like scarcity, and some, certain traits are more rare than other traits, that kind of thing. And it's finite. So now that there's 10,000 crypto punks in the world, if you want to buy one, you have to buy one from someone else. And like I said, they're going for, I don't know what the cheapest one is, but I saw one just went for like 11 million. That's probably the most expensive.
Wow.
And
who's buying this stuff?
Anybody who wants to jump into the conversation should just jump in too. I think Adam, you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm by no means an expert. I'm really interested in this stuff, but I don't consider myself expert.
I just want to say, because people get caught up with the headlines and the numbers, and they're big numbers, but you also have to remember people who have invested in crypto years ago when it cost nothing and now it costs as much as it does have a huge stock of this stuff. So it's worth $7 million, but they probably had that when it cost pennies to the dollar. So that's something to keep in mind when you hear these numbers, is that it's not just people who have its money now, it's appreciated so much in such a short period of time that it's worth this much, and they can treat it kind of like play money because they have a lot of it. So that's one of the many fascinating things about crypto. And Drew, I'm the guy who kind of nudged you to say like, oh, I'd love to see you build this, because I'm so fascinated by it. And I'm kind of part of they're called DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organizations. And then this Bored Yacht Club and the apes, the crypto, I'm getting the things confused here, but they're also a way to sort of show your support that you are part of something. And so people use it as ways like, same way people have like sports colors or teams, things like that. Like it's that iteration of showing your support and that you are part of a club. And I think that's a very kind of humanistic thing that's gone on through time. So this is just the next evolution of what that looks like. But I just wanted to sort of add to the conversation here and just basically say kind of like how you can look at this too, because it is very new and people need frameworks to compare to something, because if we do one-to-one comparison, real world versus virtual, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't equate. Why would this be worth this much? And in regards to owning art on your house, people have digital frames, and they can basically put these things they've purchased as NFTs on their digital frames to show off that they have them. Also, unlike like the Mona Lisa, they have to clean that, they have to pay to do all this stuff. The maintenance issues that you have around real art, it costs a lot over time. It depreciates. Whereas a JPEG or something, as long as it's floating around, you don't have to do anything to maintain that purchase. So there's other things that to color in this view of some of the advantages of owning like digital work and ownership that I just wanted to add to the conversation.
I'd love to ask a question on that. So the skepticism that enters my mind when I hear all these things, right? Like I'm behind the idea of it. I like the idea of it, but there's a lot of skepticism around the value, right? And I think that's where most people's skepticism around NFTs come from, and honestly, coins, in just for the same reason. And I like the analogy of a trading card because, printing the Michael Jordan rookie card costs the same as printing any other card. Right. And that value has nothing to do with how much time it took to make or how it was created or what processes or anything like that. So it's different than art, traditional art in that way, right? Like the Picasso is really valuable because it was from Picasso, right? That's the primary reason. People value that person made it. Whereas with a trading card, no one really values that Fleer made the card versus a different manufacturer made the card. That's not the important part. I think it's the scarcity mixed with just the desire to own it, right? Like those are the two things. So I like being able to translate that because that removes some of the skepticism over the value in my head, because I'm going, okay, I don't necessarily, I want that Michael Jordan rookie card, but why do I want it, right? Like, why do I actually care about that? But I do actually care about that. So I think you can translate it in that way and remove a little bit of the skepticism versus comparing it to like actual artwork, because there's certain amounts of labor and things that go into the actual artwork that doesn't translate to NFTs in the same way, right? At least for me, that helped with skepticism.
And I kind of work through that same mindset. I've got a friend, former business partner, who works for a startup called Pinata.cloud, who is in this space. And so he and I would sit as we were shutting down our consulting firm and just ponder mentally, how do we wrap our head around this thing and its value? And the closest we got, I'll say, and we buy into it, but we kind of look at it, if you look at how gaming has worked, where you have a character online, it's digital, and people are willing to spend money to upskill their character, buy new armor, buy longer life, buy the ability to build a castle, whatever it may be. People have gotten used to paying for digital status that allows you to progress on something that you enjoy doing. So it's almost like in the art world, owning a Picasso is impressive to the art world. And you can say, I have that in my house. I'm special because of that. And it's a conversation. And I kind of view NFTs, be it art, video, or any combination, being that, in your community of people, it's I have the original to this and I can prove it. And that's a conversation point and a common interest. So to me, it's very social on how the value comes about.
That makes perfect sense to me. Status games, very human.
So yeah.
I something that you guys, as you're talking about that, I'm wondering what it's like from the perspective of the artist, because does this make it more accessible for people? Like, are more artists getting paid for their work? Like, does it make it easier for artists to be able to share their work and monetize it?
It definitely does in theory. And right now people are getting paid like kind of like crazy, which will die off. It really honestly is dying off. I think the NFT craze has passed its peak for peak craziness, but I think it'll stay around. And so artists, instead of having to go through like an art broker, which is a very like centralized small group of people kind of thing to value your art, you can just put your art on these websites. They're just online marketplaces, and your art is out there. You don't really have to do any extra work yourself to make it scarce. And, like you go through their site and mint it, and then it's out there selling. So in that way, it's like insanely more accessible. I mean, so many people can just make art on their computer and put it up there, and people are doing it. And at first it was really wild. I mean, people are getting paid tens of thousands of dollars to just throw something together. I don't really think it's that like frothy anymore, but I do think a lot more people are making money, and a lot more people are supplementing. Like, if you're a designer and you draw on the side for fun, you're just getting some side income. I think that's happening a ton.
Okay, that's very cool. And so just to be clear, this is money that's cryptocurrency. Like, that's the only way you can buy these, right?
Some of the sites you can use US dollars, but I mean, you can think of it all the same. You're just exchanging. So it's like if you go on a site that only accepts Ethereum, because the actual NFTs are mostly on the Ethereum blockchain, so they might only accept Ether. You would just convert it, pay that. You don't really have to care that it's cryptocurrency, but that is how a lot of them are built. And then some of the new ones that are trying to be mainstream, take it mainstream, are just doing credit cards, connect your bank, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'd like to chat a little bit about the line that Chief said. He said, also interested to see if it breaks into mainstream real property titling, like the deed to a piece of land as an NFT.
Yeah, that's already happening.
It is?
there's two like related things that are happening. That's happening virtually. So there's that whole side where people are buying virtual land in the same way you buy land in real life. But in real life also, they're selling property. They're basically tokenizing. It's almost not, they're not non-fungible necessarily. I guess in a way they could be, but they're tokenizing real estate, and then you can buy small pieces of it, or they're tokenizing land and just doing the transaction on the blockchain instead of through the banking system. So it's starting to happen for sure. And I think a lot of people see, like, there's been some multi-million-dollar buildings, sold and financed that way already. So.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And Cora, there's actually an entrepreneur. His name's Rish, up at Capital Factory in Austin. I've had conversations with him a couple of times. He runs a thing called Super World. He started it years ago, and it's basically like a digital overlay of the real world, and you're buying like properties in the digital world, and it's already successful. And I've been watching as like 2020 happened. Basically, I was interested to see what was going to happen with that. And as NFTs started taking off, so did Super World, so I do think that, it's a layer on top of the real physical world, but it's a step in that direction. And I think there will be more companies like Super World that will push that forward.
Wow.
And
That's really
to me,
interesting.
the difference I've been learning, I think, if I'm right or not, I don't know, but for an NFT, if you look at the guts of it, it's a hash. It's an algorithm that runs against the digital piece of art or video and creates a unique large hash, I don't know, 256 plus bytes or whatever it may be, that uniquely addresses where that piece of digital art lives. So if you compare what it looks like today, if I were to buy a piece of art that's a JPEG, I'd have a URL that points to the JPEG. But if I were the person that sold it to you, I could easily swap out that JPEG, but you'd still have the address. But now you're looking at a picture of a unicorn instead of the Mona Lisa. And so you don't have that digital unique addressability like you do with an NFT. If you were to change a digital piece of art that had an NFT by just one bit or byte, the hash would be different. Therefore, the addressable location of it would be different. Therefore, it's a different piece of art. And so that unique addressable Web 3.0 type addressability ends up being a piece of the unique aspect of what an NFT is, to my understanding.
Oh, wow. That's a really great explanation. Thank you, Steve. That a lot of this stuff is so theoretical for me. So it's like, it helps me to almost imagine it having like a physical location, even if it is like digital. It's, that it's still got some unique. So I would love to transition to kind of exploring how NFTs and visual development come together. Like, what are the different ways that they can interact? Can you use visual development to create like you mentioned an online museum? Can you do that?
I think Drew dive in, because like what you've already started on there, I'm assuming you were going to demo some of that stuff. It's getting in that direction. You can really take that concept to the rest of this, to everything else. I love that name, Drew.
ded.so. Yeah, so I think this is like one way where you can start to bring, almost like my question was, can I do something with NFTs or Web3 with Bildr, like with visual development? So this is one way that kind of made sense to me, which is in the same vein as CryptoPunks or Bored Ape Yacht Club, where they're computers generating all these different files. I wanted to know how they did that, and I wanted to do my own, and then I wanted to see if I could do it visually. So what I did, I kind of put a site. It's kind of funny. This is like, it looks like a finished site. It's just like a weird, fun project I did. I'm not actually even probably going to finish it, but basically I have a system where it's generating random ghosts. They take a minute to load because I'm using the full-size files right now. Let me just redo that one. And these ghosts, they'll take a trait. They'll take a background, a face, a body, and a feet, and they'll mix and match them and just create these random combinations. And that's basically how like the CryptoPunks and Bored Apes are generated. which I didn't know. I actually was gearing up for this big challenge of how to make these like algorithmically generated images. It turns out it's actually like really simple. You just have layers of PNGs with transparency and just stack them. And so the challenge in making something like this actually is in actually drawing it and making sure, like thinking through that puzzle of like what overlaps what. But ultimately, just generating these like this, and then the idea would be, which is theoretical at this point, it's not finished. The idea would be you can mint a ghost, and that'll mint it on the blockchain. So what that does right now when you click mint is it actually takes those layers that are shown on top of each other, creates a new full-size PNG of that image altogether that you could send through an API to get minted somewhere, or you could save it to someone's profile if they're signed in. You could do more in this case. And my plan was you would come to a site like this, you generate the ghosts until you find one you like, and then you hit mint, and it would send to OpenSea's API and mint a token and put that token in your wallet. But actually, that's the user experience that is way more complex than I thought. You can get it all done, but it was a little trickier. So now I'm like, ooh, do I want to go through all that? So we'll see if I do. But the benefit of that then would be if a bunch of people have NFTs of these ghosts in crypto wallets, I can create content. I can create a community. I can create a website or whatever I want in Bildr. And instead of signing in with a username and password, you can sign in by owning one of these NFTs. And so there's like, I don't know, I think this will show on my screen, this plugin. There's like this thing, MetaMask. I can basically tap into this API, which will check people's crypto wallets and let me know if they have a ded.so NFT, basically. And so that's kind of where, like, that's where Bored Ape Yacht Club is really shining, is when you have one, you access their community with it. And then if you sell it to someone else, they now have access to that community.
Does anyone know what Bored Ape Yacht Club was built on? Like, was it made with code?
I would say it's definitely code. I don't know though. I have no idea.
I'm sure.
Okay.
I mean, and it's interesting because the community aspect of it can be anywhere, right? I mean, it could be on any community platform you want. The trick is that you're using the token itself as the thing that gets you into that community, right? So there's no like username or password or anything like that. It's checking your wallet that you actually have that or have one, right? That you've purchased one. I mean that when I found out about Bored Ape Yacht Club that was the concept, like that kind of blew my mind of like, oh, wait a minute. By combining these, it's a whole different layer of value now. So now we're not talking anymore about the playing card, right? Now we're talking about the social aspect of, hey, you can enter this, cigar lounge if you have one of these rookie cards. And you got to show it at the door, right? So now you go and sit in there with all the other people who have those. So you kind of like know that you're all on the same page at some level, and it just creates a whole different social dynamic around it. That was the piece for me that took NFTs over a line of like, oh, I'm not even talking about the same type of value anymore. It's a whole different type of value.
So Drew, if you mint one of these, no one could ever generate the same one again.
Yeah. I didn't finish out like building that out. So technically right now, no, it'll just mint 1 million. It's not doing anything except creating the image now. But yeah, that's the idea. As soon as someone mints it, it's on the blockchain, and that combination will never come up again when it's generating random.
Okay, so as far as in terms of like how NFTs and visual dev can work together, this is an example of the artist being able to create an application that creates that art that with the unique traits, and then also setting up an API that would allow the selling of that, essentially, right? Is that what minting an NFT is? It's like when someone decides to buy that.
Minting is actually creating it, and then they would sell it on their own however they want. I don't have to facilitate that. That's kind of the beauty of like blockchains and the NFT space, is I'm not creating this image in my own database on my own servers. It goes out to where it becomes this thing that people can trade on exchanges if they want. They can trade on open source marketplaces, that kind of thing.
Okay, so people could theoretically create this and then just use or create an app that generates the art, but then uses an API to go mint it by something that's like already established to do that. And that
Yeah.
creates the unique physical
Yeah.
digital location. Okay.
Or like what I would do, like to do this in kind of like a really lo-fi way, basically, I could generate these. So I could like do these myself, keep hitting generate, finding new ghosts, hit mint, and then get one, save it as a file. I could save like 1,000 of those on my computer. And then I could just go to OpenSea.com, or maybe it's OpenSea.io. I'm actually not sure, but OpenSea is like a NFT marketplace. I could just go there and just mint those all myself. And now they're like
Gotcha.
out, that would be kind of a lo-fi way. Or maybe I could tell Bildr, I don't have this in here now, but I could tell Bildr to just automatically mint me 1,000 random ones, or create me 1,000 random ones, and I could use those images. And then just to automate that, that's where the API comes in. Is like, instead of actually having me physically go and sign into OpenSea and mint them, I could maybe automate that with an API because it'd be more efficient.
Gotcha.
And
just go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting, Drew, because as soon as you showed this and you'd mentioned, the goal is not to allow a duplicate if you were to ever, further go down the path with this project, you can start seeing the ability to monetize, because let's say someone created a duplicate, you could actually let them know the duplicate existed and give them an option to buy it from the person if they really truly like what there is, because it's unique. And so you end up at a monetization point on a very straightforward website. It's like, oh, I want to own that. And for a dime, maybe I can buy it or whatever.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. And related to that too, NFTs, they're programmable. They're based in code. So I could actually put in every one of these gets sold on the market in the future, I could put in a little thing that I get 10% of that automatically, just comes into my wallet. So there's ways to monetize like that too, which, if you get as big as something like Bored Ape Yacht Club, I mean, you can make a lot of money that way, I'm sure. I don't foresee myself creating that type of community, but it's a cool thing that exists,
And then the only maintenance that really needs to be addressed, because I think that was brought up earlier, is storage costs. So if you were to buy thousands of pieces of art, there's questions I've heard being asked about, when the artist sells it, does the responsibility for the payment of the storage go to the owner? Or is there some mechanism where the artist is stuck with that cost and has to bill ongoing? In theory, it would just transfer that cost of storage to the owner at that point. And if they were to ever stop paying for that, that digital art could actually disappear, not unlike a fire causing art to disappear in the real world.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. But listen, if I'm paying $60 million for a piece of work, I better get storage included in that.
Well, and you better put it in a like Supermax type facility, right? I mean, that's the other side of this, right? Is it's going to scale up and down based on that value. They'll change over time as the value of a certain set of these gets larger. Those pieces become more palatable to pay more for, Yeah. Drew, I'd love to see just kind of the back end of this a little bit. So I see you've got some other tabs up there.
Yeah. So to put this together, like I mentioned, it was easier than I thought. It's just these 4 layers of types of things. So I've got a face layer. This is just a quick admin I built. Face, feet, body, backgrounds. And then I created a way to update images for each. And that's all it is these are just PNG images that I'm drawing with my pencil on my iPad. And so I can add as many images as I want. So these are all the faces. And like, these are all the feet. And then I just built the app itself on the front end, just grabs random things from each one and puts them together. And so what that looks like in Bildr is also very simple. Well, here's like, you can see the admin layout here. I'm just using grids and grid pages. But this front end page, I have a layer. So there's like each layer, like body, feet, face is in a grid here. And then it chooses a random image from that layer and then spits it out to this preview. That's kind of how that works. So there's just one action on here, generate random. And so what I actually created my own custom action with my own random generator function, because I know that, like, I don't actually know, but I hear that JavaScript random, you can do better, so I wanted to like separate out so that in the future, I could make a really awesome random function. So I kind of separate that out, and I have my own function here where I select a collection based on, so it selects from the images collection based on which layer it's on. It's kind of custom to my app. And then it'll just choose a random image. And that's like super simple. I think I can show real quick. I'm not actually sure if this is even it. Yeah, so it's super simple. So it's just this, where it takes an input argument, which is a JSON array, finds a random array object, and then returns it.
So basically, this function is actually generic for any JSON, but the JSON you're passing to it in Bildr is the data collection of whichever collection you're pulling from, right?
Yep. And what I did, this function, this action could go anywhere and it would work anywhere. And I did it in a way where I just send it all the info for the images, like name, the image, like everything that's in the database. I pick a random one and then I just return that whole block for that image. So I'm just like doing a very kind of like brute force, and it works fine. There's no reason not to do that. So I basically get, the result is I get a little JSON object of that chosen image. That chosen image's name. I think that's really it. I don't think there's any more info that comes with it right now. And then I just like set the name, and then I have this set the name visually, and then I have this little function that right now it's outputting the rarity percentage, which at this point is like, if there's 8 faces, I just do 1 divided by 8. It's not really a real thing yet. So that just kind of sets these, and then at the end it triggers this grid. This is another grid over here that layers images over top of each other. So it's actually a grid. So it has 4, entries into that grid. But each one is an absolute positioned image that just stacks over top of each other.
Can you show us how you did that, Drew?
So I've got, let's see. So I've got this grid list here.
Stacking?
Let me actually see if I can. Oh, I forgot no hotkeys. The new version that's coming out has Zoom hotkeys, and I was just trying to use them.
I mean, if you wanted to, we could stop sharing really quick and you could move over to that version. Okay.
I think it's okay. It's just funny that I do that. I'm just so used to it now, and it's become second nature in how I work. So
that's the point. That
Mhm.
means, they're actually something that's going to be used. I'm sure people will be happy to have hotkeys.
Drew, Chris had also asked a question about how easy is it to add additional metadata layers to each random ghost?
So right now it's super easy. And I don't have the chat open, but if that's Chris Campbell, like, what up? It's been so long. I saw your name in there, man. How's it going? We were working on like crypto stuff in like 2017 together. So right now I have a database of layers and images, and I can put anything in there. So for the layers, I can add metadata by adding layers. By adding fields. And for images, same thing. And then based on what's in there, like, and how I'm generating that NFT, I can send that metadata however their API requires. So the APIs I was looking into, I would actually send data for the traits. So when I click min right now, it just generates the image, which I can talk about how I do that too in a second. But what I actually would do in a full minting process is I would save a value that also contains those traits, and that's going to start forming the metadata. But in theory, yeah, you can put any metadata you want into these.
I assume the API, you're just sending a JSON anyways, right? So you could do it at any of the steps. You could have it in the collections. You could do it after you generate the image, and you could even add additional metadata that has nothing to do with the layers or the images at that point, and then you're sending it all at the end, right? After
Yeah. There's a few like predefined, not even predefined, maybe like standardized metadata in NFTs, so that some of the marketplaces will calculate the rarity of traits and stuff for you, because you give them to them in the format they want. And then there's also just open-ended metadata, and you can do any of it in theory. I haven't actually finished the actual minting API part, so it's kind of funny to be talking about it. But yeah, in theory, you can do anything. For this images, for how this exact thing works, I have a grid list element here that has a row page of home image composite layer, which is this page. And all this pages is an absolute positioned image. So I create this grid here. I get the value from the random, these 4 layers here create random values. I get those values and set it into this grid. That's how it kicks off. And so this grid is going to display this page 4 times, 1 for each layer. And this actual image here is bound to whatever the random result image name. And I'm doing this in a way where I'm just using the image ID or the field ID as a variable. That's a little bit like opaque. You could do this a little cleaner in Bildr where it's more visual, but I kind of took that shortcut. But basically I'm just binding the image to the image that is chosen at random. And then it displays them all on top of each other. And I order them by saying, I have a field called stack index on the layers. And then I just order them by that in the grid, the stack index here. And it's all like very straightforward. And the only thing it really needs to do is output them and then output the names of some stuff and it's done. The slightly more, oh God.
So for you normally like in a Bildr grid, right? You have a list, you'd have like a list of 4 of them. They would all be one below the next, right? So you'd have 4 of them. So where in the styling are you putting your absolute positioning to get them to actually stack? Is it in the row or in the grid?
So the grid itself probably has nothing on it. I think that's going to be blank. Yeah, that's got a position relative. I might have put that on for a reason, maybe not even. So that's basically got nothing. So it's on the row page. And on this page, I've got a div, which is a container, and I've got an image. That's all it is. And it looks like I put it on this actual container div. So I've got a class called composite image layer container. And then, yeah, in here, I've got an absolute position, top 0, left 0. And then it says Z index 0. I think that probably gets replaced from the database at some point. I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember exactly how I did it.
And just to translate that a little bit, on the grid, it's got position relative so that the CSS of the children that are all position absolute will stop their positioning at that grid. And then that'll make them all stack one on top of the other. And then are you doing the Z index with an action? Are you taking that index?
I probably am. I'm not totally sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the page loads, initially it runs page load by default, which runs page binding. Page binding is going to do element set style property. And I just set the ZX from, and again, this is me like taking a small shortcut. I just took it from the field ID variable name because that's in Bildr. I could have also come from, current record field values, select the collection, selected the field, and done it in a more visual way.
This is the part that I wanted to
property from the database. That's what that means.
This is the part that I wanted to get to make sure and call out because I assumed you were doing it this way. And just so you know, I've never actually looked at this project before with Drew, but I was like trying to figure out how he was actually doing it. So this is something that, in Bildr, because of the way we treat actions sort of have access to everything, right? So Drew is he's setting a style property, the Z index property, using the value of that new property is coming from the database, right? So he's setting the Z index using the data that's based on whatever he set into that grid. So he set the data into the grid. Each grid row then has the context of the record that's in the database. And then he takes one of the fields, which is the index, and sets it into the Z index style property. And that organizes them in the proper order, sitting one on top of each other. That's super cool. I really like the way you did that because it kind of like takes all the pieces of Bildr and puts it all together into one example.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty elegant solution too for what this is. I mean, it's really straightforward, the whole thing. So that's how you generate the actual, basically the preview. And if I were doing this in a more production environment, I would also make some smaller versions for the preview because this background, for example, is like 20 megabytes just because I want a high quality NFT. And I'm just using those in here. So I could actually make this almost instant when you click this button that they would just pop right in. I just didn't go that far. And the next step then is like the actual minting process. I can't mint 4 separate layers of HTML. I need to create a real image file based on those 4 layers. And again, I thought that was going to be like a crazy challenge. I've never done that with JavaScript. I've actually done that a bunch with PHP. And in my head, I was like, am I going to have to make a custom PHP API just to merge images? But it turns out that I went and I found this script, merge images, it's called. And so I created a header where I just use this merge images JavaScript package. Like you can get it through NPM, or you can just include this header script. So I just put the header script in as a page header, which I run on my homepage. And then now in any actions, I can use it. So I have a custom action, I think called merge images. And it's like, I just basically took, it's again, really simple. I went to their documentation, which is basically you write this merge images and then give it an array of images. So it's a little different in Bildr. It's a little custom. I took an input, which is an array. And in my case, this is super specific to my app. I didn't generalize this. So I give it this image array, which contains the image, the name, all the stuff, whatever's in the other grid. I just brute force it. I just send it into this function. And then I parse through somewhere in here. I just manually parse through to random result and then that image variable name. I just save an array of images, pass it into this third-party JavaScript, and that outputs. So I have some properties on here that you input, the array of images, and then the image that you want to update on the canvas. And so it takes that array, does the processing, and then just outputs it onto the canvas. And that's really all that part is. But in the future, instead of outputting onto the canvas, I might modify that to save the image to a database or to send it in an API to OpenSea or whatever at that point.
And Chris asked a question about the DPI. I think you had it in the function. I didn't catch it when it was in there.
About did you say
what the
DPI?
output is? Yeah, the final resolution.
It's just, I don't know. The thing that was in here, I think, was just base 64, but let me just double check. Yeah, I have these commented out. You can choose widths and heights, but what it does is it takes the original, this is like specific to just this JavaScript package too. Like I don't know, I just found it, but they take whatever the original image sizes are, and then they take the widest and the tallest, and that sets the outer dimensions, and whatever DPI it is, they just pile it in there. So like whatever the bottom one is probably what it is, and they just pile them on top. So what I did was I created them all to be, I knew they're the exact same size. I knew they were all like the resolution I wanted and the sizing I wanted. And they're more than this. They're like 4,000 something, and they're like, 4x PNG or whatever. And what I did was, I didn't know if that would work, but I generated all the inputs like that, used this, saved it to my computer and looked at it, and it all carried through. So I was like, good to go. But that's as much as I thought about that part.
And Drew,
I think you can control it more though. There's probably options to control it more.
Good. Can you go back into the function real quick? I just wanted to look at one other thing. So where you've got the random result and then you have the actual field ID static in there in the function, that's the part you were saying that's very specific to this project. But what you could do here, like if he wanted to generalize this, he could take that and make it an input argument and say, this comes from wherever you want now in your Bildr project, right? So then someone else could just use this and they could select the value from wherever they want in a data collection or from a variable or wherever, and then it would merge based on that information, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if I were making this, which I think like I will make this at some point so other people can use this stuff. So to do that, I would basically have like the input array and then maybe a value called like, path to specific object or something where I could actually enter this path that I typed manually. I could enter that as an option in the studio and then it would work. And then that way it's more universal, you have more control. But a lot of times the way I build is like, I do it this way to save time. And then if it's good, I can go back and add that, that extra usability in. But yeah, I don't know what else makes sense to show. If there's more questions, I'm happy to go through any of the stuff or other NFT stuff.
A couple of people have asked, are you going to put this into a pattern or something and share it?
Yeah, so I 100% want to put it into a pattern. The first roadblock I ran into was like minting these. So like you can get them minted through an API, but it's very complicated to take a user through the process of like having a wallet, signing in, minting, sending it to that wallet. There's so much in there that I think would make the pattern too crazy. So what I'm planning now is making this into a pattern where you can somehow otherwise get those images. And if you want to mint them yourself through an API or somehow you can do whatever you want with them, but then also build the other side of that where you can create something like this, and then also I'll provide the actions so that you can use it as authentication in whatever else you build. That way, I think it kind of captures the value where people can build something like this, but also use it as access to their app or their community or something.
I think that's the key part for me, because there's doing the API work for, minting it is going to be totally dependent on where you're minting it, right? So that could change, and you're going to end up having a bunch of those over time. But that authenticating based on it part would be really awesome to have as a, even just that by itself would be really cool to do.
You know what's crazy too? I hadn't even thought of this, but like, because everything's open and on the blockchain, if you have something, if I created this and you could pull this pattern where you can authenticate, you could actually potentially authenticate people who have Bored Ape Yacht Club in their wallet, or authenticate people who have CryptoPunks. Like, you could actually, it's expandable, so you don't even have to create this whole thing yourself.
I want that, Drew. I really think that would be awesome.
Mark, you're not ever gonna probably even own an NFT.
It's not about that. Yeah, and yes, I will. For sure, I will. Just kind of interesting. Drew's ghost ones. I might have to buy a.
I know. I really love them. I think my favorite.
I like them too. This is like a very fun creative outlet for me. That's like as far as I take it. I don't know if I'll actually make these NFTs or what, but this has been fun.
Yeah, it is super
combining
cool.
all of your talents in one project. That's really cool.
And then getting to use it for Bildr Hour, it's like a bonus. It's great. Yeah.
Awesome, you guys. So it looks like we are coming up on an hour. So I would love if anyone had any remaining questions, we could ask Drew. Or other than that, like, yeah, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, everyone is gonna go get ded.so. So you better be on it, Drew.
Yeah, there's nothing on the real ded.so yet, but I did secure it. I got it.
You did?
After Mark we were having a conversation the other day, and I basically wanted ded.so for like 6 months, but I out of discipline was like, I'm not gonna buy it till I have a project. And I mentioned it to Mark on a call, and he's like, I'm gonna go buy it. And he was just kidding. But like, it triggered me like right after the call. I was like, I secured it.
No, I was actually fairly close to buying it, Drew, to make sure you got it. Because I was like,
oh yeah.
Somebody's gonna pick that up.
It just played right into that, like whatever that human natural weakness is. But gotta get it. I got it.
Awesome.
So I've just got a question. Has anybody been buying any kind of domain names, NFTs?
You mean like
I've been collecting them, but I've heard that we can kind of upload static content, which is all a bit kind of old stuff. Has anybody done anything with them at all, apart from just kind of use it as a crypto address?
I haven't heard of much, but I feel like people will, and I haven't even bought any of my own yet. I look at them all the time, and I have some handshake, I think it's called, tokens, where it's like you actually buy the like .com or the top level domain part with them. I think it's really interesting, but I don't really know. I haven't seen anything more than just like, an easy way to pay someone, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've
actually bought a couple of them myself.
Sorry?
I've actually bought a handful of them myself just to get some names that I wanted for myself. And looking into it, I live on the IPFS, which is the Interplanetary File System, which is basically Web 3.0. But there's ways you can connect the HTML, CSS data to that file system and back and forth. So you could actually have the ETH domain connected to a regular domain. And it just gives it that 100% validity of that domain address. So basically secures the domain and the data that's associated with that domain. So it's kind of like the NFT for your website. So nobody can go back and clone your website or fake it or whatever.
Wow, that's amazing. It's still, I struggle trying to get my head around it. And even though I've been in this space for only about a year, I'm still struggling, So,
Same. Don't feel bad.
Amazing. I've noticed we've just been having kind of dialogue with other people in the no-code space, and I noticed that a lot of people kind of dropping off a little bit. Interest is waning. I didn't know if anybody's experienced that across the no-code space at all, because of the resurgence of of cryptocurrency and NFTs? Has anybody had that issue at all? Maybe
I've
it's
been
just
noticing
me.
a shift, I'd say. I wouldn't have thought of it as drop off, but I've noticed there's a shift where I think we're merging a little bit more with development, like no code and development are merging more, and we're just starting to see that. So I feel like things are changing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so interested in the way of just trying to merge this technology, and I've got loads of ideas, but it's just trying to stick to one, isn't it? It's really hard. So congratulations for you. Looks like an amazing project, and I hope it really goes really well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Steve. Good to see you. All right, everyone. Drew, thank you so much for taking us through the NFT world. That was really, really fun. And we'll do this again next Friday, the Friday after. So I hope to see more of you there. And thank you for the great conversation, everybody. If y'all have any suggestions for what you'd like to see in the next Bildr hour, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll try and find something cool for you guys.
I think, Jordan, I chatted you back. I want to make sure you see it. Send me a DM and I'll help you get going.
Cool. Yeah, of course, that should go too. Thank you,
Oh.
guys.
Yeah, I got his email.
Cool.
I'll send him some stuff.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.